Hail and well met. Lifty here, doing a quick update on the sci-fi model action.com spring build contest entry I have, which is the Star Trek U.S.S. Enterprise NCC 1701 Polar Lights Round 2 1/1000 scale kit. My quick update is I want to give a shout out to both Chris and Boyd from Sci-Fi Model Action for giving me the recommendation of this technique right here, which is pre-taping your seams before you apply putty. How brilliant is that? Previous to this, I would just eyeball my putty application, and this really solves a lot of problems. Previous to using this method, what I would do is I would test fit a part to make sure that all my parts line up, make sure little details like right here, and particularly little details like down here on the end of the warp nacelle lined up perfectly. I glue the part up, and then I would sort of eyeball some putty along the seam. What ended up happening was, because I'm just eyeballing the putty, I might put a little bit too much on or too less. The putty I was using, which is the Tamiya Gray, isn't super wipeable, or you can't really spread it really well with the fingers, so I have to put a lot on, which required a lot of sanding, maybe uneven in some areas. And what would happen, I'd sand it all down and I think it would look great, and then I would go ahead and prime the part and I'd be like, oh man, there's more sanding over here, and it would be some area where there was putty nowhere even near the seam. So it wasn't solving any problems, it was actually causing more. So thanks to Chris and Boyd for giving me the recommendation of pre-taping my seams before applying putty, because it's absolutely brilliant. And including the choice of cement that you use in addition to putty, the results are just great. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. Here's a 12500 Enterprise B kit that's near completion. You can see here that the seam that runs along the inside of this bottom saucer section is just gone. Now there's a couple areas I had to touch up this morning, but they're super minor. That seam is just absolutely gone from the combination of taping, putty, and the tester's red tube cement. And so it actually works. And so back to cement, this is the tester's red tube cement. This is the old school stuff. When I first got into modeling recently, I was like, why would I want to use this stuff? It's like old, it's weird, it's in a tube. I remember it from my childhood, I hate it. But you know, TrekWorks is absolutely right, because this type of bond not only keeps your parts held together, but acts as a filler. Particularly when you're doing the sanding process after it's dried, so it really does work. In some applications, I think when you have really thin seams, like these here, on these warp nacelles, I mean, they're tight, you can barely even feel it with your finger, and I've only sanded it just the tiniest bit after test fitting it. So when because I don't have, you know, decades of experience with this product, I tend to put too much on. It doesn't seem to clean up super well with me with a paper towel, and it's tough to sand. So I've gone with another recommendation, which was by Interstellar Modeler on YouTube, with a plastic weld. I'm not sure this is the same product he uses, but it's similar. And the plastic weld, sort of, I think you guys call it CS glue, I'm not sure, welds the styrene plastic parts together and forms a sort of permanent bond. So you want to make absolutely sure your test fit is spot on with your details, particularly these little details up here at the top of the nacelle or the bottom of the nacelle. Make sure they're all lined up in your test fit before you use a product like this. But it works great. And then also another product Interstellar Modeler suggested was this Mr. Hobby Mr. Dissolved Putty, that's a tongue twister, so you should just call this stuff Dissolved Putty Sauna, in my opinion. But this stuff is great. You can apply it with a brush. I usually apply it with the #1 brush here to my seams, and with the seam tape it works great. So I just want to give a quick update. I'll be completing these two nacelles this weekend, and then I'll be moving on to priming the primary hull. These are both sanded. This one's been sanded, particularly the Paramount Pictures logo, raised logo that was here on the top, that's been sanded off, and I've been really careful to keep the details, particularly the landing gear hatches and the rings, in place for my sanding. So I started with 600 and moved up to 1500 to smooth all that out. So that's done. The last thing I have to do is this secondary hull, which will be this weekend as well. So this will be gluing and priming, or gluing and puttying. So I'll be using the taping the seams method, and probably moving with Boyd's recommendation here of the tester's red tube, and then perhaps the Mr. Putty, but more than likely some Tamiya Gray putty, because these are fairly big seams, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hope to see you guys on the forums. Thanks.